This is Between Classes, a Qurtuba Islamic Academy production.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to In Between Classes by QIA. Alhamdulillah, today we are grateful to have with us one of our fellow educators who joined us this year, Ml Ebrahim. Ml Ebrahim, ahlan wa sahlan. Welcome to In Between Classes by QIA.
Jazakallah khairan wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is definitely in between classes.
You came straight out of classes, alhamdulillah. Maulana, just to begin, can you start by telling us something about your background, where you studied and what you're currently involved in?
So Mona, my presence here as an educator is basically in a different capacity, but my main role is been through the media. I've been in Islamic media for quite a while, first at CII, Channel Islam, and now currently at Radio Islam. And then my key job is relating to research and advocacy at the Palestine Information Network, which is a structured education relating to Palestine, awareness relating to Palestine, and obviously completed my studies in Islamic studies just about 2 years ago, doing it part-time at Jamia, completing my Alim course just about 2 years ago.
Alhamdulillah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept. So I see, Maulana, you're quite busy, mashallah. Can you just give us some brief insight into what is this Palestinian Information Network? We know it as PIN. We have programs here, PIN programs. Just some insight for our listeners to get some, what is PIN about?
So this started not, in the wake of this genocide. It started a while back, and we found that, people had a very soda water effect relating to Palestine, so to speak, whereby, if something happens, it's something in the news, everybody's up in arms, everybody's quite concerned about Palestine. But as soon as it shifts out of media view, people's attention and people's connection to Palestine would then be severed. So we said for a long-term commitment to Palestine to be built up, what is essential is education. And people understanding the depth of connection relating to Masjid al-Aqsa in our deen, and thereafter all the other different elements, because this is a media war, this is an intellectual war as well. And from that particular point in time, we started Palestine Information Network with programs at schools, with a regular WhatsApp broadcast, starting from 2016. And alhamdulillah, since then we've developed curricular supplements, and we continue consistently to feature in the media space and go out to different educational institutions.
MashaAllah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept. Just as you mentioning, I think over the years, what I found with our learners, etc., the common misconception that Masjid al-Aqsa was only the Dome of the Rock. And I think, Maulana, alhamdulillah, with Palestinian Information Network, we now have information and so many amazing things about the whole compound of Masjid al-Aqsa. Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, totally. And those were big issues before. You'd still find a few, people who are ignorant of these things on the outside. But from then till now, these perceptions have changed completely. And you'd find, I think the effect of the genocide as well is that, it's just forced people to learn quite a bit in a period of time. So when we started, you had to convince people, it's important to talk about Palestine. It's important to teach Palestine. Some heeded our call, without any hesitation, but some, didn't see the importance. But now, alhamdulillah, people are up to speed and people want to learn more and very eager.
Alhamdulillah. So the real reason I'm really interested in having this podcast today is I recently came across in the media, and I'm sure everybody else as well, when I was in Syria recently.
Yes.
And, alhamdulillah, from December onwards, we were quite grateful to see the fall of the regime there in Syria. And then, we heard some stories of people, etc. So, Maulana, how did this trip come along, this trip to Syria?
So it came about, alhamdulillah, through Radio Islam, where I do host some shows and programs, and it was basically to say that as a media broadcaster, Radio Islam does exceptional work locally in terms of community news, in terms of local politics of the country, but this was one huge international story where people had many questions. People were just so surprised that this regime of Bashar al-Assad fell so quickly, and something that has been dragging on, killed more than 1 million people over a course of 14 years. It just came to such a sudden end. People were hopeful. People saw this as some sort of great prospect for the Ummah relating to Palestine. But people were still very uncertain. Who's behind this? All of these kind of questions. And we said the only way to actually find out is to go there. And it was quite a hazy kind of journey, because you don't know what's the protocols. There's no proper rules from South Africa currently to be able to visit Syria. You don't know if there's a visa or not. You don't know if they're going to allow you to board the plane, etc. But we took that risk to be able to find out. And alhamdulillah, once we got there, everything just fell into place beautifully.
Alhamdulillah. When I visited Syria in 2008.
Okay, mashallah.
Alhamdulillah. So that time there was no war or anything, and it wasn't a settled country, but you could see some turmoil, etc. Not very developed. But I remember something specific, that in every shop, everywhere, there was a picture of Bashar and his father.
Right.
Everywhere. So now that you've gone there, there's just day to day how it was that time, and you could see people lived. I wouldn't say in absolute poverty, but life was not very easy. Now you've been here. Is this your first trip to Syria?
First trip, yes.
So just give us a general, when landing in Syria, what you see, what's the first feeling, how is it there?
So it's quite interesting when you say what you saw in every shop. I'll tell you what I saw in every shop in just a bit. But before that, I was just landing in Syria today is different in that this airport is kind of in a way bombed out. Not literally, it's functional, but you'd see abandoned aircraft on the runway, all the signs of war. But the first impression right through is one of joy. That on the aeroplane, there's people who never imagined that they would be coming back to Syria, and for the first time they actually breathe that air of Syria and walk off the aeroplane. People literally went into sajda that we've finally come back. Suddenly, you don't know what's happening on the plane, but as soon as they land, they start cheering, they start clapping, they take out their new Syrian flags. So one can then understand the depth of the emotion, that they never ever thought that this would come to an end. They never ever thought that this flag of a free Syria would be flying. The second impression that I get is one of friendly people. That not to put down any other Arab nations, but every Arab nation in terms of their demeanor as a particular way. But here it's absolutely open-hearted, absolutely friendly, and a genuine kind of friendliness that you see, and hospitality from the people. The other thing then would be the sense of history, Maulana, where I've been to perhaps other places like Turkey or like Palestine, but the concentration of Islamic sites in Damascus and other parts of Syria is just amazing. I don't think you can match that. Besides Makkah al-Mukarramah and Medina al-Munawwara, you can't get that anywhere. And then the last thing before I come to what I saw in every shop was the striking beauty of Syria. But it's obviously Damascus would be quite barren and dry. But as you go to the north of Syria, that the landscape changes dramatically, and it becomes so beautiful. Just olive trees as far as your eye can see. These beautiful mountains with white rocks, rivers. so extremely fertile, and that's when you see the physical barakah of Sham. So what you see everywhere is the new Syrian flag. You see happiness, you see joy, and in every shop now you won't see that picture of Bashar al-Assad for sure. I mean, somebody would make themselves an obvious target by keeping a picture like that now. But in every shop there is a money counting machine, because the Syrian currency is devalued to such an extent that if you have to exchange $100, you would get 1.3 million Syrian lira. And we weren't ready to deal with this, that when you exchange that money at the money changer, you don't have enough space to keep it in your pockets. You don't have enough space to keep it in your wallet. It's like a huge wad of notes. So you literally have to take a separate bag just to carry your regular money, less than 2,000 rand. And therefore, to pay for ordinary things is quite a nightmare to count that money. So to be able to bridge that, all shops have these money counting machines that you have in banks normally, to be able to quickly count money and to be able to process such huge stashes of cash.
Okay, we'll come back to this now. I just want to go back to the plane. After the people that you say came out and made sajda, etc., after how many years were they returning home?
It would have been anything from 14 years or less. So people were left during the course of this revolution. But there is a chance, we wouldn't know the personal stories, but there is a chance that people could have been there even longer than 14 years, because some people have been in exile, potentially for 20 years, 30 years, from different phases of the regime. So you could imagine that the depth of joy for those people would have been even more greater if they've been around, out for even longer.
All right. Were there any youngsters, maybe they were left Syria when they were in their youth, or babies, or?
I would imagine again that would be possible. We just didn't get the opportunity to fully go into those stories. But there would definitely be people there who spoke about they went to Germany or they went to the United States. They started their new lives there, and they were truly they really never ever thought this would happen so quickly.
All right. Okay, Mullah, so now going back to the money. For a meal, bread, something just to fill your stomach, we say a suitcase of money, a knapsack of money. How would you describe it?
Not necessarily so much, but it does give you this picture of when we talk about our neighboring country, Zimbabwe, at a particular point in time, that entire 2,000 rand, the equivalent in Syrian lira, you'd probably it would be 5 or 6 big stacks of money. So maybe the size of the length of that those notes all put together would be the length of an A4 book. Right. But the thickness of it's impossible to be able to carry that in your pocket. Just to give you an idea in terms of for a bottle of water, it would cost you about 10,000 Syrian lira. And then so you're dealing with 10,000s, 100,000s, millions. This is what you're talking about. And then when you come to just say a regular meal at a takeaway or a restaurant, you'd be saying about 200,000 or between 100,000 and 200,000, a basic meal with a drink included.
Okay, so let's now take it to the Syrian people who are living there. How much, how do they move around? How do they use their money, or what is it worth for them per meal, day-to-day expenses, petrol, cars? How do they go about this?
I think they've found, a person in the midst of a crisis, a person just adapts and moves on. So, for us, it really takes us aback to be dealing with such amounts of money. But I don't know what's their particular mechanisms of dealing with it, but they're really taking it in its stride. What I did notice, where in a country like ours and most of other parts of the world, it's everything's wireless, and everything is tap and go. I hardly saw anybody really using their bank cards in that part of the world. I didn't see ATMs. So I think it's impossible for them to use ATMs with such a volume of cash that's required. And I think there's also a shortage of cash in circulation. I saw a deal that was struck recently for more printing of money that's going to be happening through Russia or something of that effect taking place. And in terms of fuel, that's something also that's very conspicuous. That you don't see filling stations that are functional or the main source of fuel. There are these makeshift people on the side of the roads who've smuggled in fuel from Lebanon, and these little plastic bottles that they sit with, like huge Zamzam containers on the side of the road, and they're filling directly into cars at every other corner of the road, because there's sanctions still, and there's not a proper supply of fuel coming in, so people are relying on these kind of items.
Okay. So there are shops, there's supermarkets, and is people able to buy and carry on like normal? Yes.
So it's not. There isn't a standstill. I don't think it's like if one has to think of Syria and equate it to what Gaza is now. A person might think that starting up life in Syria today is exactly what Gaza is. It's not exactly like that. It's the major important centers like Damascus, like Hims, like Aleppo. There's destruction all on the periphery of these cities, or sometimes in certain parts of the cities, but the functioning of the city is continuing. Regular work, regular life. You go to Damascus, there'd be these big traffic jams, that vibrancy of any Arab city like you'd see in Cairo and like you'd see in all these places is present right until this point in time. Perhaps it's even more than a few months back because people are returning. But electricity is a big issue. We were told that in Damascus they're only getting 1 hour of electricity a day. But contrast this, where a place where we spend a lot of time, which is Idlib. This is the heartland of the Mujahideen who have now taken over the country. So they have been in control of Idlib for a long period of time. These areas that are surrounding or on the border with Turkey. So the regime was pushed out of these areas for a long period of time, and that gave them the ability to be able to stabilize. And that gave them the ability to actually have a functional state separate from the regime in those particular areas. So this is the contrast that in Damascus, they're dealing with 1 hour of electricity a day. Here, they've got 24 hours of electricity a day. They've got a bustling economy. They've got good systems, good telecommunications, etc. And a lot of that is basically working through Turkish infrastructure. That Turkey supported these areas, or Turkey invested in these areas, and they're running off the Turkish grid. So they're in a way better situation compared to other parts of the country that were under the regime and are now trying to recover.
Okay, Maulana, you mentioned the Mujahideen, and Allah Subhanahu wa Taala grant all the Mujahideen in the Ummah success, and victory over the oppressors.
Amen.
Can you give us, like, as outsiders, and after having been there, what is like just a basic understanding of how this takeover took place? I know it's been there for many years, and we always heard of the Mujahideen, and there were bombings and things have been going on. And as you mentioned in the start, the same with Palestine, we sort of became immune to it.
Yes.
So, like, just basically for us to understand, like, how did it now come to taking over the whole of Syria?
So Syria genuinely is something that at one point, especially 2014 onwards, became extremely complex with so many different groups. It wasn't just a clear-cut picture of these are the resistance and that is the regime. It became more complicated than that. But in brief, you'd have to say that this regime was in existence for decades, starting with Hafiz al-Assad and then Bashar al-Assad. And in the wake of the Arab Spring, people rose up. They rose up peacefully, but when the regime cracked down, they were absolutely brutal, even against school children. This revolution started essentially from Daraa, where school children wrote some slogans against Bashar al-Assad, and those children were targeted and tortured to death. And that then changed the nature of this revolution from just peaceful demonstrations to an armed revolution. And the Mujahideen in the early phase, it was people who grabbed any arms, whatever they got, or people who defected from the army and joined the revolutionaries, and thereafter people who joined it, people from all over the world who joined in as well. So they started off in a very makeshift way, but they achieved rapid success, and they were able to take over huge parts of the country. But then one has to understand that with so many different groups and so many people with different ideologies coming from all over the world, this kind of muddied the waters. That there were internal disagreements amongst the Mujahideen in terms of approach. Syria generally being a place that's rooted in, madhahib, whether it's the Hanafi madhab, also extremely strong, whether it is the Shafi madhab, but then you'd have people who came with, an understanding, ghair muqallideen from around the world. They came with a particular understanding, and there were all these tensions. The focus was the regime, but to manage this became complicated. And then you had this group called ISIS pitching up on the scene. And ISIS, everybody was suspicious about ISIS. They just made, mass takfir, called everybody non-Muslims. And there's a great suspicion that they supported the regime of Bashar al-Assad. So whereby the Mujahideen were achieving great inroads, they were introduced to the scene and they just divided and created fitna wherever they went. So basically this fight, Maulana, went through different phases. By about 2019, then it reached a kind of stalemate, and Bashar al-Assad was able to recover many areas that fell from the regime in the earlier days. So it was now thought to be a lost cause. He was now back in charge. But the Mujahideen were in control of Idlib, that Bashar wasn't able to get back from them. They stabilized and they started forming structures, and they started, making unity amongst all the different groups. So they were planning for a good 6 years in this particular way. But coming closer to the final battle, they said that when October the 7th happened in Palestine, they realized that this is changing the dynamics of the Middle East. And they realized now it's a chance to be able to do something. So they started planning, and they said, we just planned to a certain extent that we wanted to take back maybe Aleppo, which is an important city. But when we put our plans into motion, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave, because of our preparation and His mercy, Allah, allowed our success to be beyond all expectations. That we just wanted Aleppo, but when we targeted Aleppo, a command center of the regime, which comprised both, the Russians, the Hezbollah group, the Iranians, the regime, that it disrupted their communication so spectacularly. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala caused like a special fog, they say, to descend at that particular time, and then from just one city, the entire Syria fell at our hands. So it wasn't planned that they wanted to take the regime in one fell swoop. They wanted to do it in stages, but because of perhaps their sincerity, because of their planning, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it that the entire country fell at their hands.
Alhamdulillah. After the fall of Bashar, we then saw when the Mujahideen had taken over, we saw Israel come into the picture and bring tanks into Syria. And that, what's just a quick overview of what Israel was trying to do, or the current state?
So that's in a sense a bit of a misconception to say that Israel entered the picture only after the fall of the regime. In actual fact, Israel has controlled the Golan Heights for decades. And this was all through the years of Bashar al-Assad. So in actual fact, the Israelis were quite comfortable with Bashar al-Assad, that he maintained one of the most calmest borders. Whereas, for example, Lebanon was always a hot border between Lebanon and occupied Palestine, and Jordan also tension there, Egypt tension there. But this was the coolest front between the Israeli state and one of its neighbors. So they always occupied this particular area, but after the fall of Assad, now they saw, number one, there's a vacuum. Because the groups that took over, they didn't have an idea of taking over the whole country. So now they're dealing with a new reality. How do they move forward? So they saw a vacuum, and they were opportunistic to be able to grab more land. They already controlled areas of Syria, so they grabbed more land than they already controlled. And then they also read the feeling from the new Syrian rulers that this is a period of rebuilding. The priorities of a new leadership is, there are so many people who are refugees, we need to get them back to their homes. There are so many towns that are completely destroyed, we need to rebuild these towns. The economy is totally devastated, we need to rebuild the economy. So that's the focus of a new rulership, and people have no appetite to continue fighting, at least in the immediate. So they read that and they saw this is an opportunity to be able to fill this vacuum and steal more land, and then put the new Syrian rulers on a back foot because they're not ready for all of these kind of challenges. That's the way that we read it.
Okay. All right, Maulana, now we mentioned Bashar, and one of the things that Bashar did was he imprisoned a lot of people. And I saw Maulana's video on Sedanaya prison, and it really shook me up. And I went to research more, read up more, see stories of people. What were your thoughts, Maulana, having heard about Sedanaya before you visited, when you were there, after your visit there? Did you get to speak to people who were detained there? These things really, made our hair stand. For you who were visited there, what can you tell us about it?
So before this, we had always had this idea of Syria being a mukhabarat type of state, a state of intelligence, just like spies everywhere. Like you would even suspect your own family members to be spies. And then you heard about the level of torture in Syria, that even the United States of America, when they captured Muslims during the so-called war of terror, they would send them to countries like Jordan and Syria if they wanted a serious interrogation or serious torture. So you've heard all of these horror stories. But I think even for myself, we were quite ignorant about it until we saw the fall of the regime and that footage of people now pulling people out of these dungeons. That's when Sedanaya really came onto the world picture. So when we went there, what struck me was how raw it was, that we were able to see it perhaps just as it was on those days after it fell. It wasn't as if anybody tempered with it or tried to clean it up. You found people's clothes, just strewn all about. So people were probably trying to break out of the cells and they were choking, or they were getting quite hot in the cells as they were trying to break the bars. They probably took off some of their upper garments. So the whole place is just filled up with clothes. And then the whole place is filled up with holes that people had dug. So, people came there to try and relieve or to release their loved ones who they thought were in there. But they always heard that this is quite a shadowy place, that there's underground dungeons and there's all kind of secret places, but nobody has any idea of how to access these places or even where they are. So they just started digging, started breaking gates, and you'd see everything in that particular raw state. But the most shocking part for me was, number one, when you go into the secret, I don't know exactly what's the main purpose it served, but when you go underneath into this pitch dark place where you have these solitary cells, extremely cold, 2 by 2, the thick black cobwebs on the roof, the toilet in the same place as the cell, open toilet. So a person is in extreme cold, bad stench in the air, insects, scary insects in that particular place. And then on the wall you would see them, the graffiti in the prison, Ya Allah, that this is really the dua of the oppressed being made in these parts, basically beneath the soil. So these were people who were forgotten for quite a while. And then you come to other parts of the prison where supposedly people were chopped up into pieces. And there was like a acidic smell in those areas. Nobody would have survived to tell the tale, where people's bodies were compressed. People's bodies were then, disappeared. So coming out of this entire experience, I still want to, whatever we've seen, I want to interpret it more, to be able to look at the stories of people who've been there and explain what was done in the different areas, what was like the kind of this happened in this area, interrogation, then people were moved to this particular area. I still want to understand that better, but what feeling it leaves me with is many people who, after this revolution, came with these fantastic arguments. And, they said the fall of Assad is going to empower the West, and the fall of Assad is going to empower Israel. And these people were supposedly part of the axis of resistance that was assisting Palestine and so forth. And I just said that even if they were assisting Palestine in some way, do we need this kind of dhulm to assist Palestine? You need people who are pure, people who are sincere to be able to assist a cause as blessed as Masjid al-Aqsa. And what we see here is a kind of oppression that even surpasses what the Israelis have done in many ways. And then the other thing I reflected on, Maulana, was the system behind it. That this prison had a particular architecture. They said an L shape and a Y shape, and this red block and this white block. So whoever designed it must have been extremely evil. Just to think of that architecture that's going to break the human spirit, that's going to make a person lose his mind. And then the torture that happened behind that, again, all working according to a particular system. It's really absolutely evil. And one cannot imagine a human being behaving to a human being in that way.
Did Mona have opportunity to meet any people who were detained there?
So when we were at the prison, we understood that even after we went, so it's not just open to the general public, you need some kind of permission. And we understood that after that, perhaps they're not even allowing any people to go back. But there was, very few people in the cells at that particular time. We met one important person in the new government who was in that prison. So he didn't go in depth into his experience, but he said he was there. And there were other people that we met that were not in Sadnaya. Let's understand there were many prisons across Syria. So we spoke to other people who spoke about their interrogations in other prisons. And we spoke to one man in Ghouta who said that my son was in this prison. And on the day that the regime fell, I rushed to this prison. So he was part of all this breaking and all this attempt to release the prisoners. But he says that his son, the last he knew was that his son was in this prison. But after that, when he went, he wasn't able to find his son, not able to find any traces of his son. So it turns out that perhaps his son was one of the thousands who were killed or disappeared from this prison. And that's why everywhere you go in Syria today, there's these papers on the wall to people say, my missing son, my missing daughter, missing father. So there's lots of people who weren't able to find their loved ones at all. So those were just some of the direct interactions we had with people who had some link to the prison.
When I was looking at all of this, news and footage and media, sometimes in South Africa we have this understanding of who is pious. And we read so much and you pray so much, and like Ramadan is about khatams, etc. And you look at these people of Syria and you feel that إِنَّمَا يُوَفَّى الصَّابِرُونَ أَجْرَهُمْ بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ. Certain tests Allah Ta'ala has put on people and Allah is going to reward them without count. And you look at these people of Syria and say, really, this is for them. What they go through, they might not have made a khatam, but they get much greater reward because how they forbearance through all of this. Okay, well, I'm going on. What little I saw is and one statement comes to mind, is one Syrian person said that even if there's nothing to come out of this whole fall of the Assad regime, but the release of prisoners, then it's a success. So you see, alhamdulillah, finding positivity in all the difficulty. What is the general sense of, among the Syrian people? I saw one person saying that he didn't ever want to get married, have children in the Assad regime because of the fear of how his kids would grow up. Generally on the streets, etc., what is the mood? What is the vibe? What are the people feeling? What are they saying? What can we as South Africans, alhamdulillah, love, eat with ease? What can we take benefit from them?
So the atmosphere is really one of positivity. The the general expression that people have on their minds now, from the leadership to ordinary people, is that we are now going from marhala to thawra ila marhala til bina. We are going from the phase of revolution and active resistance to now a phase where a lot of rebuilding needs to take place. So people, but generally, it's already 2 months in, but people are still in a kind of celebratory mood, because if people's wings, so to speak, were clipped for such a long period of time, even what Maulana has described there, that when you went in 2008, you would perhaps see people who are living their lives, but there's a hidden kind of tension in those lives. There's a hidden kind of torment that takes place that people live with, but it's always suppression of themselves. So people are now able to fully express themselves, fully have a free media now after many years. So generally, people are extremely positive at this particular moment in time. But what I would find from a South African perspective, what you've been asking about, is that I see a different type of maturity. I see a different type of outlook, particularly in these areas where people have lived through so much difficulty, where the priorities are not the same. People see the year after in front of them. People see the future of the ummah and the great events that are going to be happening in these lands in front of them, and there are lived realities for them. It's not something theoretical or something that people just a nice report back that people like to listen to. This war has molded people, just as it has molded the people of Gaza, and Allah has prepared them. Perhaps this particular area as well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prepared them to a great extent, and you see like a great maturity from the young to the old, and it's become kind of a society of mujahideen. Even though the war is over, people have that outlook, people have that desire. That's even how they dress, that's even how they speak. And the second thing I wanted to focus on here that we can learn as South Africans is when I gave that contrast of Damascus versus Idlib, that this was the area, Idlib, that took in so many people from all other parts of Syria. So they gave the example of this being like a Medina, and the people of Idlib were the Ansar, and then accepting Muhajirin from all over the world. So one would have thought, the conventional thinking, so many more people, this is going to affect your resources, this is going to, there's going to be a battle, a scarcity of resources, competition for resources. And we see the absolute opposite of that, these areas that welcomed everybody and opened their arms to everybody are now the most prosperous in the country. And that's a call to then defy maybe this capitalist mentality where people are scared of foreigners, people are scared of assisting others, people are scared of opening their homes to others. In actual fact, by doing that, you don't lose, you actually win, and this is a very tangible example of that.
Alhamdulillah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspires us to take lesson. When I went to Syria, I remember, and one thing that stands out, I said I had to ask you, was visiting the graves of Sahaba radiallahu anhu, particularly Bilal radiallahu anhu, and if I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly, Abdullah ibn Maktoum radiallahu anhu is also buried in the same maqbara. Did Maulana get a chance to visit the graves of any Sahaba?
Yes, so that's a must to visit this Baba Saghir cemetery in Damascus. So it's just outside the walls of the old city of Damascus, and like I said at the beginning, I think the concentration of great Islamic personalities in one place is just mind-blowing when you come to Damascus. And that struck me particularly, that two of the mu'adhins, it's not just Sayyidina Bilal radiallahu anh, but it's also Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Maktoum radiallahu anh in the same cemetery. So both the mu'adhins of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in this particular cemetery itself. Then you have Muawiyah radiallahu anh in the same area. And there would be others like Abu Darda radiallahu anh. You would have all the Umayyad Khalifs, very important players like Walid bin Abdul Malik and so forth, Abdul Malik bin Marwan, all in that particular area. Then you'd come out, you have the giants like Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, You have the giants like Nuruddin Zanki. So in that same area, Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Kathir, etc. So when you want to name drop, this is a place that everybody is there. I think you really need to spend a lot of time there to say, when you go to each of these qubur, relive the stories, then you'd feel it actually much more than just a short trip. But then when you go out beyond Damascus, we've also visited Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiallahu anhu in Hims. That was a masjid that was badly destroyed, but that masjid is now restored and it's thriving. And one particular qabr that we went to that's kind of off the beaten track, the entire area around it is destroyed. That is in the Ma'aratun Numan region, is Sayyidina Umar bin Abdul Aziz rahimahullah. So we went to that particular qabr as well. Unlike all the others where there's lots of people visiting, this was totally isolated. The structure has been damaged, but it's still in a decent state. But nobody kind of looking after it. Nobody living. Very few people living in the immediate area of that. It's great to see that we've got this opportunity. Many people thought that everything was cut off because of the war. People would not be able to see these sites again. Alhamdulillah, people are able to now go back and see all of these sites and relive this great legacy.
Alhamdulillah, subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the opportunity to visit this place and take lesson, inshallah. Maulana, as South Africans here, it's the month of Ramadan. How can we help Syria?
So a specific call came out from all the people that we've met. They said it very simply: "Sa'adtana fil bidaya, fala tansana fil nihaya." That you are there as South Africans to assist us in the beginning. So do not forget us now at the end. Don't think that the war is over, that the challenges are come to an end. There's still 14 million refugees who need to come back to their lands. And there's so much rebuilding where these towns have been totally destroyed. So the assistance that's required is still on an exponential scale at this particular point in time. So one, they said, just on the level of awareness, don't forget us. Don't think that you shared in our joy and you're happy with the fall of the regime. It's over. They emphasized the importance of dua. So Ramadan important to keep Syria in their dua, because they might have come to the end of a military battle, but now there's a diplomatic battle. The powers of the world are trying to influence Syria and jockey for influence. So remember them in your duas. And one specific call they made, that maybe the call is not there's not a direct appeal at this moment in time, but they said keep this particular area in mind, that there are 14,000 masajid that have been destroyed in Syria. And their call was, can you pitch in? Can you come as the Muslims of South Africa and play a role in the rebuilding of these masajid? It would be a great investment going forward, to be able to rebuild these particular masajid and then have a South African contribution to Bilad al-Sham. Building up this country is building up Sham, and building up Sham is going to then build up the strength of the Muslim Ummah for the important role that Sham has to play in the future.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant them success and all the Muslims in the Ummah. Any future planned trips? Where would you like to visit? Next on the agenda?
I think at this particular moment in time, obviously the priority of my trip is not it's on the wish list, but we want to see them reach stability and ease. First and foremost, this is the people of Gaza. But I think we really want to go to Gaza more than anything else. I really have this feeling that we need to sit at the feet, kind of metaphorically, of the people of Gaza, that you are the awliya of Allah, that you've been through so much, and you are the people of the Quran, that the Quran pulsates through your life, and you are the people of Alhamdulillah and Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil, etc. So more than the place itself, we have been to Gaza previously. More than reporting and getting to know what's the state after the war, it's quite clear what it is. But just to sit at sit with those people of Gaza and benefit from their company, that's on the wish list, inshallah.
My mother told me once that certain people are universities, And I think if we open our minds to this, to take benefit and learn from the stories of people, we'll find quite a lot of benefit in our lives, inshallah.
Totally. I concur with that 100%. Now, when you go to Syria, you think, okay, you want to meet the big officials and, the big names. You'll benefit from that as well. But the ordinary person that just bumps into you and you start asking questions and they open up in their lives, that's where you get the most unique stories.
Alhamdulillah. Well, to end off, we have our QIA podcast book, where the previous guest had written a question for the next guest, not knowing who it was going to be. So we asked Maulana to read this question and answer it, inshallah, and then write a question for the next guest, inshallah.
So the question that's written here: how are we going to develop great leadership amongst our youth for the future of South Africa? Quite a weighty question. I would suggest that we need to develop. I'm just trying to build on the spirit of the trip that we've just engaged into. I think we need to develop the spirit of sacrifice amongst youth in South Africa, whereby there's this great danger where people talk about difficult times create great people, and then easy times create weak men. Easy times create people who are watered down in their courage, etc. So if we want to have great leadership, we need to have resilience. We need to have the spirit of sacrifice amongst our youth. So even though conditions might be favorable and we enjoy the conditions and the bounties of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon us, I would suggest that sometimes we have to create programs, or we have to create opportunities where we struggle it out a bit. We have to deal with less resources. We have to deal with the challenges that other people face, and in that way it will be able to develop our perception and develop our qualities, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair. You can write the question and you have to tell us, and the next guest will be surprised, inshallah. Jazakallah khair, Maulana, for taking out your time. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept all your efforts and the wonderful words that you shared with us, and make it a means of light and guidance for all of us, inshallah. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept your work with regards to Masjid al-Aqsa in Palestine, and increase our love for Masjid al-Aqsa in Palestine. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam. Jazakallah khairan.
We could not have made this audio adventure possible without the incredible contribution of Maulana Aslam Raja, Appa Amira Hajjat, and the brilliant minds of the Qurtuba Islamic Academy podcast team.